Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our continued coverage of the World Cup 2021 edition, and welcome to the first video that is going to be filmed in this new apartment. Many of you have been following, obviously, my life over the past week or two, and now we're in a new place. It's currently 10:51 p.m. We've been moving since about 12 hours ago. We finally got everything settled. Internet is up and running, and everything will kind of get filled in as the days go on. So I've got my camera on the way, my new lens on the way, but the World Cup keeps on going. I didn't realize how cropped to the right I was, or to the left. So we're gonna do some live cropping here before we actually get into any recaps. Hope you're all doing amazing. And I don't know, I don't really have much else to say. So let's kick things off with the matchup between not these players, but these players, Magnus Carlsen and Andrei Yesipenko. So they drew their first two classical games. They drew their first two 25-minute games. This is now the 10-minute segment. And Magnus Carlsen beat Yesipenko in the fifth game. So now Yesipenko needs to win with the white pieces. And for the last big portion of this match, we had this opening. Which is, I'll even throw in this move, which is in Italian. Both players play bishop c4, bishop c5. White plays c3, d3, rather than c3, d4, which I really like for beginner intermediate players. And we have a very long-winded positional maneuvering game. The first trade occurs 10 moves later. White brings the knight to d2, very flexible move. You don't know exactly where the knight is going to go. Takes space on the queen side, and then and only then takes space in the center, while black routes the knight to g6 to stabilize the center and plays c6 to maybe play d5. Players continue to maneuver. See white is taking space on the queen side, bishop e6, and finally on move 18 we have our first trade, which is pawn takes pawn on b5. Now, Yesipenko takes back with the bishop that attacks the rook. The rook must move. The pawn on c3 is attacked, but danger levels, counterattack on the bishop. Bishop goes back to d7, and now the bishop goes back to f1. Queen c3 impossible, because in many lines, the rook can take the bishop on b6. But you actually have to be a little bit careful, because you can't just go and do it, because you would lose the bishop on a3. Actually, after queen c3, you would play a move like queen a2. And it's just very difficult for black to do anything about this bishop. If black plays the move bishop to c5, that solves the problem with the bishop, but your queen gets trapped. So you have new problems. Congratulations. Rook b8. And it was very clear Yesipenko suddenly was playing this game for a win. He's got pressure against this very weak pawn. He's got a very nice bind. His bishop on f1 guards this knight on c4, which exerts pressure on everything important in black's position. And yeah, positionally, black is just dominated. But now, of course, you know, Magnus is going to cocoon. That's the difficult thing about this position for Magnus, is that he might lose a pawn, he might lose two pawns, but he's got some, you know, got a little cocoon action going on over there. And by the way, knight takes a5 is very much a free pawn, but Yesipenko chooses not to take it and instead goes for the pawn on d6. But that kind of allows him to get a little tangled here. You know, now his rook can't move because he'd lose his queen. So he has to play this move, and Magnus is just sort of sitting back going, you can't really move your pieces. Apparently, Magnus could have played knight f8. And knight f8 is a very strong move because, for example, if you play queen b2, unpinning, black plays bishop takes a4 and knight d7. In fact, black's entire idea with knight f8 is to put the knight on d7, which would attack the rook on b6. f6, queen a1, knight h8. That was another fancy way of doing it, to try to play knight f7. And now the only move, bishop b5, looking to trade the bishops off to throw in the Zwischenzug in between move, rook to e6, because if this, your rook is stuck. So here, 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 and yes, white is up material, but white is completely paralyzed. White cannot move either rook anymore. So is white up? Yeah, white is up a pawn. I mean, material isn't the best way to describe it, it's just a pawn. But white is up a little bit, but you can't move either of your rooks. Instead of that, we get a position like this, where Yesipenko has one very important asset going for him, and it's this. It's just the pawn on d5. And what's going to happen is that no matter what happens in this game, whether the queens are traded, or whether the rooks are traded and we end up with an endgame, white is always going to have more advanced pawns and much more active pieces. If you have a material advantage in an endgame, that's great. Yasipenko is up a pawn. But if your pieces are dominating your opponents and you make the right trades and you stabilize, now this is just game over. He has activity, material, good looks on his side. I mean, Yasipenko is winning this matchup in more ways than one. And this game actually was about 20 more moves, but it's just all white is doing is just making progress. He picks up a second pawn. Look at that move. Look at that, danger levels. And that knight is stuck, and that's it. And Yasipenko uses the d pawn to his advantage and uses this little trick. Gets out of the way, take my pawn, and now I check you. We trade, and this is a winning pawn endgame by virtue of the move g5. Sometimes pawn endgames, you can make moves like this because you do something called a clearance sacrifice, and then you... Actually, it's funny. King takes g5 probably also wins, but he doesn't even take. He goes for the meteor pawn and plays king d6. b5 would have been met with e5, b4, e6, b3, e7, b2, e8, b1. Except there's check here and check, and you lose your queen. And this was the first loss Magnus Carlsen suffered in the entire Sochi campaign. However, in the next game, Magnus now needs to knock out... well, not knock out. Magnus needs to go to the 5-minute portion, right? To knock out Yasipenko is what I meant to say. They played 2 classical, 225, 210, and the score is 3-3. And we have another e4, e5, but actually now it's funny because the colors are switched. Yasipenko plays the move d3, d6 against d3, and then proceeds to allow this damage to his structure. And now Magnus plays the move d4, and you would think that Magnus should have developed a knight or a bishop. Why is he moving the d pawn again? Well, black is a little bit slow on development, right? d4, and here, this move is totally asking whether or not Magnus is going to jump into c6. Because it looks like your knight is simply getting stuck. But it's not. The knight comes back to a5, and then you stabilize it. It's a really weird position. And black just can't take on e4. Taking on e4 is too dangerous. There's rook e1 always. There's knight c3. Here, bishop c3. And you just have too much. You understand? Like, because black has not really ever gotten out of the center, black is never going to get out of the center. So you can't do this. Many of these positions, when your king is stuck in the center, you should not be taking the e-pawn. And once the first 15 moves had gone, Magnus had an advantage. He had an advantage by pawn structure. He had an advantage because he has a lead in development. Queen e1, castles, rook d1, and he finally ends up taking on d5. Nice little trick here. Knight c4 you can't take because the queen is hanging. And we get this. And now this is really good for white. I mean, these pawns are just sitting there waiting to be taken. Bishop goes back to b2, queen g3. That is a mate threat. It must be dealt with. f6 immediately leads to the destabilizing, right, of those two bishops. Now the knight comes back to c6. I mean, Andrei Yasipenko is on the verge of getting just punched straight in the face. Or I suppose he's getting punched straight in the face. He's on the verge of collapsing. Rook e8. Takes, queen f2, rook e8, queen c5. Okay, Magnus has cashed in on pawn number 1. He's now up a pawn with all the benefits of the position that he had earlier. And by playing bishop to a3 after rook d5, now rook e7 is also a possibility. So Yasipenko was essentially stuck playing only moves. But he starts coming up with very creative ways here of trading off pieces at the right moment. And then he activates all his, he activates his knight and his bishop. And this is a problem for Magnus, because if he plays rook takes d7, even though white is a pawn up, because black has activated every piece and has traded off the rooks, counterplay is about to be created. This is very bad for Magnus. And suddenly, Yasipenko, from the depths of defeat, has emerged with a more or less balanced endgame. I mean, an endgame that is going to take wizardry to win. Black just hangs out, no obvious weaknesses, puts this h-pawn forward to create some counterplay, queen f5. I mean, he is having a time of his life here. Queen d2, queen g6, creating threats on the king. King goes back to g8 because if you take, there is this move. I mean, Yasipenko's really figuring something out. Now the rooks are off the board. I mean, what is this? Magnus trades the rooks because he understands that this is a weakness, And in the long run, he will deal with this pressure by maybe sliding his king slowly over, getting out of the way. And Yesipenko went in with bishop to b1. When queen a7 got played, bishop a2 is playable, but it's very dangerous for black because you're about to lose 3 pawns potentially. So Yesipenko hesitated and played bishop back to d3 to try to play bishop here. And it looks like white cannot take on c7 because bishop f1, but white can because white has a check, a tempo-winning move to come back. And the rest of this game, Magnus Carlsen is simply up 2 pawns. You can hold an endgame against Magnus. You cannot hold an endgame against Magnus down 2 pawns. He advances confidently. He doesn't allow Yesipenko to take. He uses the d-pawn as a decoy. And that's it. And the pawns will fall. And that is how Magnus Carlsen bounced back to ultimately defeat Andrei Yesipenko. Not because of this game, but because of the next Blitz game, knocking him out. But he did suffer defeat in this match, and Yesipenko in classical chess remains undefeated, in fact, with a plus score versus Magnus Carlsen. So that is a massive, massive psychological victory, although I'm sure that Andrei Yesipenko will not be leaving the tournament going, oh, well, that's great. I'm out of the World Cup, but at least Magnus didn't beat me in classical chess, you know. So, yeah, I don't believe that is how he's going to approach the situation, but it could be worse. So, with that, allow me to take you to this game between Velimir Ivic and Vladimir Fedoseev. Ivic is an 18-year-old recently minted grandmaster from Serbia, and to Serbians and non-Serbians, if you think I don't know my flags, I very much do know my flags. I put Serbia as the flag. It looks like chess.com does not have the correct flag programmed. In fact, I don't know what that is. That hopefully is a real flag of another country, but that is not the Serbian flag. So Serbians, don't hate me. You can, write angry messages, although I have submitted a ticket and it will probably be fixed. But yeah, for the sake of these two, Ivic has had an unbelievable run in this World Cup, and he's looking to bounce back after a loss in the rapid portion of the tie breaks versus Vladimir Fedoseev. We have Ruy Lopez. Okay, nothing surprising. Bishop e7, d3. Normally, white is playing rook e1, c3, and d4. But of course, there is nothing wrong with playing d3 and c3 and then knight d2. This is just one of 5,437 ways to play Ruy Lopez. Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Maneuver, 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 maneuver. d5 is played in the center. Still no trades. I just want the first trade to happen. Boom. Okay, this game, it took 16 moves, 17 moves. What is happening? Well, if you notice, white played h3, always possible with g4. And in a lot of these Ruy Lopez's, after a long maneuvering game, white really likes to open up that center for those bishops and plant a knight on f5. This is super common, instant replay in case you weren't paying attention, right? White just stabilizes the center and then utilizes the outflanking maneuver to get to f5. But Fedoseev is extremely quick with the queenside counterplay. If pawn takes b4, knight b4, or bishop b4 are coming, and then something can land on d4 in the future. So bishop a4 is played, and he just gives the pawn away. He just says, you can have this. I don't need to do anything. I can go, I can, yeah. By all means, yeah, come on in. Go ahead, because I got this. Ivic is throwing this punch. Knight takes h6 check. If you take on h6, I will take on f6. And it looks pretty unpleasant for black. I mean, knight h5, bishop h6, rook g2, you're gonna get mated. So Fedoseev goes here and tries to kick out his pieces. The problem is, Ivic's not going anywhere. Plays the move bishop g5. Now, if pawn takes f5, I got bishop f6 on the way, queen h5, queen h8, that's mate. The game is over if that happens. So knight d7, but now d4 comes, dynamite. Like, what is going on? I mean, d5 is a threat. You have to take on d4. I come back, I hit your queen's gotta go. And this is where Ivic dropped a real haymaker. Knight gf5. Go ahead and gobble with the pawn, because then I'm gonna hit you with this one. And then, if you take with the pawn, I have queen h5, queen g6, you lose the game. If you take with the queen, little bit of boop action, and it's not just the queen, it's the door opening for my queen to take your rook, and you can't do anything about it. So, bishop f5. But there is still a point to all this because there is this. Velimir Ivic is winning the game. Bishop g7, but the problem is he's got about 20 seconds and Fedoseyev's got 2 minutes. Rook d1, queen b4, queen c2, rook f8. And somehow Fedoseyev is making a little bit of progress in this position. And if stability is restored, then there's going to be counterplay. We have queen e4, a5. Queen e2, not queen e4. King h1, queen c4. He's trying to get a queen trade. If a queen trade were to occur right now, there is going to be counterplay. So he plays bishop d4. But now there is this move, c2. And no matter what white plays, disaster strikes. Because if you take my queen, I'm actually just going to go here. Now we both have queens, and they're both hanging. So you lose. And if you move your rook, now I take your bishop. Low time ultimately proved to be the deciding factor here in this playoff, as Fedoseyev survives a rampant, belligerent attack by Ivic. A fantastic attack. So close. And he ultimately succumbs to the pressure, and Fedoseyev moves on to the quarterfinal. And I mean, Ivic should just be proud. The nation of Serbia has a new face of chess. No disrespect to their current grandmasters, but this kid is for real. And if we go to Serbia FIDE, just before we move on, you know, this guy's number 4 in the country, but he is 25 points officially away from the number 1 position of Alexander Indic. So, yeah. And I think he's gaining rating from the Olympiad, so he might already be like number 3 or number 2. Yeah, amazing. And I see there's another grandmaster in Serbia, born in 2004. Luka, I'm not gonna lie, it's a very difficult last name. Budisavljevic? I don't even know. Anyway, amazing stuff. I'm very sorry that the Cinderella story is over, but big congratulations to his tournament performance. This was the only playoff in the women's section, Muschuk versus Zanidze, to determine who would be the last semifinalist. This was a Najdorf, Sicilian. I mean, this is vintage fighting chess. Bishop g5, black opts for the knight d7 and g6 system. So this is a Najdorf dragon, sort of. Bishop g7, and then like this. So black plays the dragon, sort of, with bishop g7, and also a6 with ideas to play b5. The problem with playing the Dragendorf or the Dragdorf is the fact that it's known to be extremely dangerous for black if white knows what they're doing. And Anna Muschuk is a player who probably will know what she's doing. It's very double-edged. Very double-edged, because, you know, normally when you're playing the Najdorf, there's positions you don't even castle the king. I mean, it just hangs out right there. The structure is totally different. The style of the play is totally different. Your bishop's not on g7. You don't have a pawn on g6. The pawn on g6 accelerates white's attack because it's a target. I'm going to keep chipping away at it, right? So bishop to b7, h4, right? I told you the pawn on g6 is a target, folks. I told you. Sorry to get mad at you, but I told you. Knight takes b3 check. This move is extremely natural and extremely bad. That's the craziest part. Like, of course you would think you need to get rid of the bishop, which is targeting your king. Knight b3 with check to slow down white seems very natural, but it's a very bad move. Apparently, you just gotta suck it up and take this pawn. And this looks unbelievably dangerous because, for example, knight takes e4, and if you play knight takes e4 in this position, I will play queen g4 or pawn takes g6. I mean, I'm crushing you. Okay, you win my bishop. Congratulations, you won my bishop and you lost your king, so good job. No, Levy, there's h6. No, there's not. No. Don't even stop. No. Stop it. So knight b3, of course, naturally looks like a very normal move. However, after just this, now you don't even have counterplay on my pawn. Apparently, knight takes e4 was the right way to go, though. You had to take on e4, and then here you had to take with the bishop. That's... I don't... Yeah, I mean, Muschuk is just doing what she do. Queen f3. Her idea? Queen h3. You say, well, Levy, why isn't black playing b4? This is such a natural move. Anybody with half a brain plays. But yeah. And you don't even have that, okay? So, queen h3 anyway. But Levy, yeah. And what? Queen h7 is mate. Who are you trying to convince? Levy, rook e8. Yeah, then you lose in even more stylish fashion. Oh no, my queen. It looks like a mouse slip. No, you get slaughtered. No. And then they make a blog post about your game. It's even worse. You see, I mean, she's just going to work. I mean, everything I told you about that king side falls apart. Knight f5 is on the way. Black tries to sacrifice on c3, but that doesn't impress anybody because now white makes the successful transition from a winning attack to a winning mid-endgame, like middle endgame. Now you've still got the attack, but you're always up the exchange, right? So e6. Bishop takes g2 actually would have been a good move here. Maybe black didn't like this, and the queen is lost, but that's at least +2. This is +15 after the following move. Rook takes g6. This would have won the game on the spot. Because queen g6, there is this, and here there is here. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The rook is coming to help. It's game over. But white plays rook e1. Black is still in the game. But the problem is that white's position is just so good that finally when black got the counterplay going, white played this move rook f6. And it still looks like black is trying to create some counterplay. I mean, the position does look full of life, but unfortunately not. This rook just absolutely paralyzes black's queen. The king hides on a3. And if the queen could somehow magically teleport to a7, that would be mate. The problem is it cannot bulldoze through its own pawn. You know, take the pawn out back and... But sadly, this is not of mice and men. Queen, and now you see the clearance, sacrifice, and the infiltration. Black resigned because anywhere the king goes, the rook follows. And if the queen goes to f8, the rook follows into g6. King over here would lose the queen, and this would lose to rook f6. And Zaniza was unable to recover. Muschuk wins a fantastic attacking game and shows you really why the Dragendorf is so dangerous. And she is the last semifinalist. And that takes me to our final game of the day. And this is a game between Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and Sergei Karyakin. Sergei Karyakin is, he is a former world champion contender. And he's really good in this format because he's really good at rapid and blitz and he's extremely solid in classical. So this, I believe, was their second game of tie breaks. And MVL went for a Jobava Prie, or you know, whatever, Jobava London, or however you want to call this, c5 and a6. This is one of the main ways for black to play against this. You need to play a6 at some point if you're going to play c5, or else knight b5 is super strong, and knight c7, which is why you play a6. So knight f3, takes, and this is the way I like to play it with black. I like to just like develop my pieces and make sure that the center situation is clarified. Most of white's play comes with this move knight e5, but if you just take and be solid with like e6, white really needs to work pretty hard to prove any advantage, which is kind of why MVL just plays h4 for literally no reason at all. Surely if black castles, then h5, and at least you can create some attack, but h4, you know, the golden rule, if you can en passant, you should. Well, if you h4, you got to play h5. That's just the golden rule. Knight d3, knight e4. And here, Karyakin was like, bro, are you just giving me this? Like, that's just the free pawn, okay? And it really wasn't, because after takes, knight c5, there are very big problems for black. b7's hanging, e4 is hanging, h4 is under pressure, and h5 behind it is hanging. And not only is it hanging, he just gave it to him. So now queen h8 is threatened, knight b7 is threatened, knight e4 is threatened, and knight e6 is threatened. And you can't take because you would hang your king. Only one move solves all of those problems. Can you find it? It's queen d5. Because if queen h8, somehow you're safe. If knight takes b7, I don't even know what this knight's doing over here. I got this counter shot, and then I'm going to win your knight back. You can't take this, or this, because you'd lose your queen. And if you take on d5, which is how the game proceeded, and then take on b7, that's actually the best way to do it. But now black gets counterplay. g5. Bishop d6, looking to trade and escape. Karyakin says no. Knight's hanging. If you move it, bishop hangs, takes, rook takes b7. We're going to have knight versus bishop, except you have to defend your b pawn, and I've got los peones. d5, e4, f5, g5, the four musketeers. Look at that. White is a pawn up, but can you feel it? Do you feel that white is a pawn up? Because I don't. I don't feel like white is a pawn up. I feel like black is a pawn up. And then black plays this move. So now black also has the advantage of controlling the only open file on the board, which is extremely important in endgames. I cannot stress this enough. If, for example, you keep pushing and white plays rook h1, it's now plus 3.5. White is completely winning. So beginners and intermediate players, take the damn open file so that so you can, you know, pretend at least that you know what you're doing in endgames. And now b4 and rook h2 attacks the g2 pawn. Now at this point, I'm pretty sure MVL saw that after rook here, there are all sorts of tricks associated with just, you know, g4, f3 and marching in. He must have not liked something because he ended up just giving the g2 pawn away completely. So now he's not even a pawn up. But the problem is that a move like b5 to just chug straight along looks great, except for the fact that it loses the game to this. Levy, I don't understand. I know you don't understand. That's why you're not in the World Cup. Levy, you're also not in the World Cup. I know. I mean, I don't know why you have to be mean about it. Knight c4 is mate. Yeah, and if king d2, rook f2, knight c4, or knight b3 even, very bad. So, now he plays this move, but now Karyakin gets f3, and then Karyakin gets e3. Wait, that doesn't work now. Yes, it does. All Karyakin needed was one knight move that MVL completely granted him because these three pieces are going to win the game for black. And just like that, MVL resigned. How? Why? How did MVL resign? Why did he resign? Knight d2 check. If king e1, rook e2 is mate, actually. Rook e2 is mate. And I mean, you don't have to mate me. You can play this. You'll mate me in two moves. You can just delay the inevitable. In fact, you can move your king over here. In fact, you can let me queen. You could do this. Rook g1 is still mate. Still mate. So, Sergei Karyakin knocks out Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. I mean, this man is just, he's ageless. I mean, I know Sergei Karyakin's a young guy. We just don't hear about him so much because after the World Championship, in 2016, he became like an international television icon and like a chess ambassador, sport ambassador in Russia. So I'm very happy he's doing well. And let's take a look at the standings because tomorrow we have some more games, okay? This is what we look like. Carlsen moves on to face Etienne Bakro, who knocked out Kacper Piorun from Poland. Young Krzysztof Duda, #1 Polish player, moves on versus Virid Santos Gujarati, and that's a massive matchup because, I mean, it's just, I mean, what more is there to say? Unbelievably strong players. Vladimir Fedosiev, this is a crazy, I mean, do you guys remember how Tabatabai saved yesterday's position? Unbelievable. And now he knocks out Martirosyan. Martirosyan was up 1-0 and was a knight move away from making it to this next round. I mean, he is going to not sleep very well for weeks, probably. Shanklin Karyakin, that's a very interesting matchup as well. Super exciting. 8 players in the quarterfinal. And on the women's side, our semifinal is already determined. It is Garyachkina versus Mushchuk. And it is Kostyuk versus Zhang Congyi. Alexandra Kostyuk has gained 40 rating points in this tournament. 40! 40! He could give you 40! In the words of Stephen A. Smith about Kevin Durant. Or actually, I think he said 50. So they are some of the strongest women in the world. I mean, top 5, top 6, and they're all in the World Cup. So this is amazing. They all get a spot in the women's candidates, I believe, is the official rule. And yeah, we're going to do a full screen outro because once again, I just want to thank all of you if you made it this far in the video. And for your continued support. It's been an unbelievably stressful past few weeks, moving in, setting everything up, now moving out, but we're here, we're better than ever. I see all your comments like, you know, Levy, it's crazy, you should take some time off, Levy, this, you know, how do you, like, yeah, the first thing I do when we move is set up this whole station. I make sure everything works, because I know I got to get back on the grind. Like I said, I don't know a grind different than content creation, so I really enjoy doing this, and this is a nice little station for us to interact, whether through comments or from me talking on camera for 30 minutes. Anyway, I've been wearing this shirt for 12 hours. I'm gross, and I will see you all tomorrow. Peace out. Get out of here.